most people that knew me at that point were just waiting for the shoe to drop, had no faith that I would stay sober, no faith that I would do anything.
Who are you, for those not familiar?
I ended up building a bunch of different apps and then failed for 7 years.
Almost every millionaire I know, it took them 10 years.
Sometimes you have to do the work to get ready to receive. And some people are just like, give it to me now. It's like, if I gave it to you now, you'd literally implode. What do you think people don't get about being successful? I just want bigger problems. I think bigger problems equals a bigger life. And most people are scared of bigger problems because they haven't developed the ability to deal with them. So they kind of sabotage themselves to stay small. A lot of people ask me what I do to be successful. It's not what I do, it's what I don't do.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at Turbo Tenant and Ballpoint Marketing. These two companies are big supporters of the show, and they know how to work with real estate investors and help real estate investors grow their businesses. So be sure to stay tuned to hear how you can get discounts and free stuff from them both. And as you probably know, all the profits from this show go to charities of the guest choosing. So when you listen to the sponsors on the show and you work with these hand-chosen by me sponsors, you're actually doing good for the world. Now let's get to the show.
This is the Better Life Podcast with Brandon Turner, and Cam Cathcart's not here today. But I'm super excited about this. Last time we talked, it was one of my favorite interviews I've done. Over 500 interviews in my life, one of my all-time favorites. And I learned all about you and your past and your history. So we don't need to rehash all of it today, but I love a quick, who are you, for those not familiar?
Yeah, I'm a software guy. So you guys are predominantly real estate, I'm assuming. Yes. Yeah, kind of all over. So what's unique about my background is I actually learned how to write code when I was 17 in rehab. So ended up in a lot of trouble as a kid. Anybody else steal a car, get chased by the cops? Am I the only one in this room? Come on. Who won't put their hand up? So that was kind of my early childhood. So learned a lot about myself, got diagnosed with ADHD when I was 10 or 11, and just grew up in what most people would consider a kind of dysfunctional family. And when I finally got sober and discovered programming, it literally saved my life. Learning how to code and becoming obsessed about it became my new addiction. And it was hard. I mean, most people that knew me at that point were just waiting for the shoe to drop, had no faith that I would stay sober, no faith that I would do anything remotely good with my life, let alone be successful. And I just couldn't stop trying to find ways to build things. Like, I'm just a builder. I'm a creator. So I ended up building a bunch of different apps and then failed for 7 years. So a lot of people, when they're, these young cats today that are like, why am I not a millionaire? I've been at this for 18 months. I'm like, can you please, I'm trying to be polite about it, but like, you're just so unreasonable.
Almost every millionaire I know, it took them 10 years to get to that point.
It's always 10 years. It might be a year in the thing you're doing now, but there's 9 other years where you were getting ready. We say sometimes you have to do the work to get ready to receive. And some people are just like, give it to me now. It's like, if I gave it to you now, you'd literally implode. Like, like we all know, I know if you would have gave me the $1 million when I was 17, I know, like yesterday I was walking with a friend and, he's like, what do you think people don't get about being successful? I said, well, it's just going to make you more of who you are. I was like, look at that person over there. Okay. If you gave that person I consider doing this for my YouTube channel, $100,000 cash to that person on the side of the street. What do you think happens? Do you think that person magically turns their life around or absolutely sets it on fire? Like they would.
Dude, that'd be an amazing YouTube video.
It would be a great video, and just like walk around with them and like listen to what they say. That, hey man, don't tell anybody, but I got $100,000 in my backpack. Like that's what they would say, because I would have said that, right? And then guess what? Your friends would be like, yo man, give me $1,000. It's like, oh, I don't know, man, $1,000, real money. And it's like, and then that night, 11:30, a few drinks in, they're like, yo bro, here's $5,000. I love you. It's like. 7 weeks later, it's like they're more depressed because they had $100,000 they no longer have. So I just think that's all. I was 7 years just trying to get ready to receive. And luckily I had some pretty cool people show up in my life and show me a way to win.
So you wrote Buy Back Your Time.
Yep.
Where did that idea, why was that the book that you're known for? It became a huge hit.
Yeah. Most people mess up, I think, writing books because they do the thing that's most commercially viable. And it makes total sense, right? Somebody's like, hey, you should write a book. And it's like, what book should I write about? I should write about the thing that I know, because then it generates customers. My philosophy is very simple. I believe the energy that goes into a project is felt by the customer. So when I was looking at like all the different kind of topics that I could write about, because I've been building companies for 25 years at that point, I had like 7 really, I thought these are unique perspectives on some pretty broad, meaty topics. And that one though, I just couldn't not come back to it. It's like every time I wrote about the other ones, that was the one that came up, because it's kind of the foundational concept of being successful in general. If you don't learn to stop trading your time to save money and instead spend money to save time, right, to reinvest that time, then you're just never going to be able to have the leverage to do anything big. So it just kept coming up as the primary thing. And I've been teaching it for almost 15 years. I learned it back in 2008 is really when I crystallized the framework of the buyback loop. And I just felt like that's the thing I wanted to bring to the world. But at the time I'm a software guy writing about productivity. So it really kind of didn't make sense, and it turned out to be one of the biggest gifts in my life.
Yeah, it really hit, and it struck a chord with people. I mean, myself included, and a lot of these guys in the room. It's like, oh, it's a way of thinking about growing a business that we don't often think about. We think about hiring somebody who then is going to grow my business, but you kind of took a different approach. Is you're going to hire someone to buy back your time so you can then grow your business, right?
Yeah, and it's really the first principles approach. See, this is what everybody gets wrong when they hire people is they usually hire somebody to do more of the work. So if I'm a logo designer, I'm going to hire another designer. If I own a restaurant, I'm going to hire somebody to manage a restaurant. Or it's like, if I'm a chef, I'm going to hire another chef. But the truth is there's probably 80% of your calendar that is lower level tasks that any person could do. And then it gives you more space to do more of the thing that makes you money. And then at some point, hire people to do that. So it's really, I always go back to my calendar. Yesterday, a friend asked me, how do you deal with overwhelm? And I'm like, I wrote about it in the book. Anytime I feel overwhelmed, where anybody else feel overwhelmed sometimes, overcommit? It's like, you can't say no. You've got this disease, right? Where it's yes. What do you got? Yes, I like that. I'll do that too. So what happens is when you feel this way, I always go back to my calendar. I look at the previous 2 weeks. I ask myself where I need to renegotiate with people, because that's what happens. We just take on too many things. And then from there, I kind of group things into buckets of stuff that I need to either stop doing, give to somebody else, put on the hiring, play, like these are the new hires I got to make. And then this is the big key that I think I talked about in the book, but just a sequence of it comes later on, is what do you do at that new time? So before I hire somebody to buy back my time, I've already decided what I'm going to reallocate it to, so that I don't get stuck in this. I have so many friends that do this. They're like, man, this is great. I've been on vacation for 7 weeks and I haven't been in it. And I'm like, where did you read that in my book? Like, this is not 4-hour work week. The subtitle says, and build your empire. Like, so for me, it's about buying back the time strategically from a dollar point of view, and then reinvesting that time on becoming better. Like when I look at where I'm at today and where I want to go, all I know is that I'm not good enough yet. Like, comma yet. Everybody should literally add comma yet to your sentences when it's like, well, I'm not good enough, because I know I can be. I just need to find the time to go learn the skill. And I mean, that's why we're in this room, so that we can all upgrade our skills and then, dedicate ourselves to becoming better. Because like, I just want bigger problems. I think bigger problems equals a bigger life. And most people are scared of bigger problems because they haven't developed the ability to deal with them. So they kind of sabotage themselves to stay small.
That's so true.
Yeah.
What are the biggest mistakes you see entrepreneurs making when trying to outsource more or try to hire more people, build their team?
Such a great question.
Thank you.
What do I see people? Because there's so many things. First off, I got a good friend of mine, and I'm going to walk you through his thinkings, and maybe you guys can resonate with this. So step one, he had to hire somebody to help with sales. So he went to third world country, $3 an hour.
Yep.
And I think it was like 7 weeks into it, he's like, it's not working, Dan. And I'm like, when did you know it wasn't going to work? He's like, pretty much the day I made that decision. So I like to ask this question. As a coach, is one of my questions I like to ask is, what are you pretending not to know? And when I asked him that, he goes, I was pretending not to know that I knew this wasn't going to work. And I was like, you knew better. Like, this is not, You've never had a winning strategy. Like key people like sales or marketing leaders, like that's not something you try to go cheap on. Yeah. That's where you try to find the best talent. So then he went the next route, which again, this is what most people do. They go on a virtual assistants or some part of the world because it's cheap. That doesn't work out. Then they go low cost intern. Okay. My wife's cousin's 18-year-old son.
Yep.
And then they go that route. And that could help. That could work for a little bit. But the problem is then you end up spending more time to train this person than they're actually giving you back, or the results aren't there. So it's actually quite expensive. So most people don't ever look at costs in regards to like, well, I didn't get the yield. You ever hire somebody and you like negotiate a really good comp, like low base, big variable. And if the person doesn't work out, you're like, well, it didn't cost me anything. No, it costs you a lot because you didn't get the result while they were working. They like, to me, if somebody didn't perform and they were with me for 6 months, I lost that 6 months of performance if I would have just paid somebody else that could have done the job from day one. So then he did that. And I was like, what are you pretending not to know? He goes, man, and this is a very seasoned entrepreneur, no different than us. Like he knows better. But again, it was just like a new thing, trying to, take the easy way. So I think I see that a lot of people fail of like trying to buy back their time with the wrong talent, right? The talent and the results they're looking for don't match. It's really simple. It's like if your outcomes that you're trying to achieve, if you want to get rich, you can't act poor in action, right? Like you have to invest in almost proportionate to the size of your dreams. You can't like act small, desire big. I think people have this this thing they do where they outsource and then like say you figure it out. They hire somebody and they're like, I pay you to do this, figure it out. They don't realize that most people, if they're not given like a playbook to follow, then it's unreasonable really to expect somebody to be able to figure this out. Like if you've been doing something for 15 years, like how are they supposed to come in day one and just like read your mind? Yeah,
but it feels so good. Like you have somebody walk in the door, you're like, oh my gosh, I never have to do this again. Good.
Yeah,
and I just want to walk away.
Yeah,
like,
never have to talk to you. You're going to figure it out. You'll always be awesome. You'll never have a bad day.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of fascinating. So one of the big strategies that I'd love to share with everybody is the concept of train, don't tell. Train, don't tell. So everybody write this down because this will change your business life and will make you the most money. Out of everything I teach you today, this could make you the most money. One time I was coaching one of my clients, very successful software entrepreneur, probably doing 30 million, and he was frustrated with his team. And I was listening. Sometimes I let people go on just to really like Ray can feel it, And he's like, oh, and this happened, and this. I was like, ooh, what else? And this happened, this. Oh, that sucks. Anything else? Yeah. Oh, this happened. Da, da, da. I was like, wow. I was like, have you ever made a list of all the things your team does that frustrates you? He's like, no. I said, well, let's write it down. Let's audit this. Let's figure this out. So he made a list, and I was like, what's the first thing? Well, they don't know how to collaborate in meetings. Anybody ever get frustrated with your team doesn't know how to collaborate in meetings? Am I the only one? Everybody, come on. Every meeting's perfect. No, it's like nobody cares as much as I care about, like it's all these things. And he makes this list of like, they don't know how to respond in Slack properly. I mean, you name it, he had the list. And then I said to him, okay, rank order it based on if the team did this, it would make you the most money and impacts the most amount of people. So if you think about all the things that frustrate you, what's at the top in regards to if they learn this thing, it would make me the most money and impacts the most people amongst your team. And I said, how many of those things have you personally taught your team? He goes, shit, Dan, you got me. He's like, it's like a sniper, like got him right between the eyes. And he's just like, oh man, I never thought of that. I said, look, your job as a leader is to actually like be a mentor, be a coach, train. That's what leaders do. Leaders develop their people. My philosophy is we build the people build the business. He just didn't know how to do that. He's never done it before. Most CEOs have never built the business that they're running. Yep. So they've never really figured it out. So I taught him that one framework. And I think the first thing he taught them was how to ideate properly, right? Like actually just how to have a conversation that's all about trying to find options, not criticize people's ideas. That's a big thing. He inherently learned it himself. And he said that one thing the next week. So my philosophy is every week, 1 hour, it's called leadership training. You should lead and teach your team a skill. And that skill of learning how to train is also really powerful. And developing your people is really powerful because then they're going to see you as somebody that pours into them. You may already do this, but just one-on-one. And it's just a lot better when you formalize it. And then that's your role to pour into your people.
That's super good, man. I can't think of the last time I sat with my executives and taught them anything.
No, it's just, we always say like, read this book. Let's do a book club. It's not the same, right? Because the stories are better when they're like, hey, last year we were working with this consultant agency and this happened. And so it's like real stories from the business that they can see because they were part of it. And then that's the lesson.
Very cool. Hey, on this podcast, not to sidetrack it a little bit, but on the podcast, we give away all the profit from the advertisements for the show towards a charity of the guest's choosing. So do you have a mission or cause or purpose, anything you want us to give the money from this episode towards?
100%. It's an outdoor program for at-risk youth in Canada, where I'm from.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll connect you with Mike who runs that, and that'd be incredible.
That'd be amazing. Thanks,
dude. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a good way to give back and
make it win-win.
Make it a win-win for the show.
You're a good dude.
Yeah, thanks. All right, man. That said, this is going to be an ad right here.
All right, so I look down at my phone and I see this text. You need to call me. Your house is on fire. And I sat there and I'm looking at the screen and I'm wondering, is this some kind of a joke? The guy who sent it was a tenant I had been trying to evict for months and he hadn't paid in forever. He had trashed the house. I mean, it was disgusting. And the guy himself was, pretty darn unstable. Now, of course, I call him after that text and it goes to voicemail. Great. Now, a few minutes later, I get a call from the fire department. Yep, my first ever rental house was burning down. So how did I get myself in that situation? Well, I didn't screen that tenant. I put in someone I thought would be good, and he was until he wasn't. Now, this is over a decade ago, and since then, I've learned how to properly vet a tenant. And that's through Turbo Tenant, which makes screening for both background and credit really, really easy. But it gets even better. Turbo Tenant also helps you market your rentals to like dozens of the largest sites, including apartments.com and Redfin. You can create custom leases that cover all your rental laws. And you can even use Turbo Tenant for your automatic rent payments. All of this for less than the cost of your Netflix subscription. Yeah, I know, crazy. Save time, save money, and save your sanity by using Turbo Tenant. And because you're so darn cute, you can use the code Brandon10 to save 10%. So check it out at turbotenant.com/betterlife. Hey, so many of you have heard me tell that story about how I bought my daughter Rosie a fourplex, like a rental property, the week she was born, and how we put it on an 18-year, mortgage payoff plan so it'll be paid off when she graduates from high school. So essentially, my tenants are paying for Rosie's entire college. Now that's pretty awesome, right? Not to mention, it's also making almost like $1,000 a month in cash flow. That's double awesome. But I don't think I've ever shared really exactly how I found that deal. So here it goes. I found it through direct mail marketing. And here's how. I simply built a high quality lead list of a lot of names and addresses of potential sellers. And I sent out a whole bunch of mail to every person on that list. And then I talked on the phone to a ton of people. And then I finally got one person that was interested enough to sell me the property. And I got a deal at a great price. So building that giant lead engine like that, I mean, it works, but it takes a ton of time, knowledge, and effort, which can really slow down an investor's growth, which is why I reached out to my friend Ryan with Ballpoint Marketing. I asked him to sponsor this show because they're the best at doing everything that I just talked about. Like, they're literally going to help you build your entire lead engine. You're going to get a one-on-one call where they're going to help you figure out what you want and then build your lead list for you. Their robots are going to handwrite the postcards with a real pen, which is super cool. They're going to send them out and they'll even answer the phone calls for you. Plus, they'll help you track it all inside of a CRM that they create for you. I know, it's crazy, crazy awesome. And it's going to help you land way more deals consistently. And because you're awesome and because you listen to this show, you're going to get a discount when you tell them that I sent you, or just use code Brandon when checking out with them. I love Ballpoint Marketing and officially recommend them to all my friends and masterminds. So if you're ready to kick your deal flow up a notch, getting more quality leads without pulling your hair out, just go to ballpointmarketing.com/betterlife, or just shoot me a DM on Instagram with the word ballpoint, like one word, ballpoint, and I'll hook you up with them directly.
All right. Dan, what is the 10-80-10 rule? I love this rule, by the way. It's probably the most life-changing thing you've taught me via your book.
The 10-80-10 rule is not what most people think. It's in response to creatives that still want to create with their team, but not be pulled into the work. So I've seen this play out. I think I codified this probably a decade ago, but I've seen it with authors who write books. I don't know if you guys know this, but Tom Clancy, have you guys ever heard of Tom Clancy's books? He's not alive anymore. Just so you guys know, he's dead.
Really?
Yeah. And he just had a bestseller last month and the month before. So like, here's a person who is no longer on earth and still has best-selling books, you know? I saw it, you know, Steve Jobs talks about it with, you know, if you read anything between him and Johnny Ives and how he interacted with the design studio at Apple. You see it with even Gary Vaynerchuk. He's talked about it. He has a whole team called Team Gary that's like, you know, if I had to guess, about $2 or $3 million a year in payroll just to support Gary's personal projects. And they use this process of the 10-80-10 rule, which states you want to spend the first 10% of a new project with your team to really set the frame for what they're trying to create, right? So if there's a Ferris wheel out there, let's say I bought some land, and I want to build that Ferris wheel. That first 10% would be to meet with the team and really cast the vision for what we're trying to do. So if I was trying to do this with my team, I'd be like, here's all the top Ferris wheels in the world. Here's some of their numbers. I talked to these people. This is what the best Ferris wheels do. This is how they fill them up. This is like, I would try to bring as much ideation to that meeting so that everybody involved would be able to like learn and then have a clear direction of that's what we're going to build. And you almost want to speak as if like it already exists and like you're just pulling the future into your life. Then what you want to do, obviously you need people that you train and that are competent. The other 80% is execution. So the first part is ideation and then execution. Well, execution is, one sec, these two boys you guys are going to come up on stage. You know the rule. Okay? Are you done? Wrestling. I literally have two of my boys there wrestling. Which I absolutely love. Like there's something, if you didn't have a brother growing up, I had two brothers growing up, and my wife one time, they were doing this, but worse. And I think one of them was bleeding. And she's like, this is so bad. I'm like, no, it's not. No, this is like tame. Like we're good still. But yeah, so the center part is execution, having your team execute against that vision. And then what you want to do is come in at the very end for integration. That's where you take any loose ends, you tighten them up, and you really make sure that it meets the mark. So like I would come in at the very end when that thing's all buttoned up, maybe a month before it opens. I'd look around the grounds. I'd figure out if everything was set up right. I make sure that the people were trained right, the marketing plan. So like that's what Steve Jobs did. That's what a lot of people did. I mean, Gary Vee is upfront with his team for ideation of content. The team captures a bunch of stuff. They have like these internal contests for how they edit. And then at the very end is when they actually, sorry guys, boys, over here. I want Max. Come here, bud. Yep. This is what we do.
All right, let's see it.
Are you going to stop, bud? Yeah. Well, do you want to sit on that chair over there? Okay, you go over there. Thanks, bro.
You're a good dad.
I try. I love it. There's this, I'll give you a quote to kind of help you with that. The world will show you where you're not free. The world will show you we're not free. And I think a lot of parents, they have these moments happen and they get overwhelmed, they get angry, they scream, they get embarrassed, blah, blah, blah. I mean, this has been happening since they were 2. So I've had a lot of practice of just like feeling the feelings and just trying not to propagate. I don't know if you guys grew up with parents that were a little bit emotionally responsive. Let's call it that. So yeah, lots of practice and lots of love. The last part is that integration. So think about this. Gary sits down with his team, ideates on content ideas. They shoot, they edit, they have internal competition. And at the end, what they do is they post it in a iMessage thread, all the editors, and he chooses which ones he wants to publish and he writes a caption. That's that last 10%. So that's the way he does it. Jobs would work with Johnny. They would ideate, come up with prototypes, etc. And at the very end, when they were launching a new product, what would he do? That's when he would create the keynote and he would work on the presentation. Arguably the most important part of a product launch for Apple is when Steve Jobs, or now Tim Cook, takes the stage to announce it. So that idea, I've seen, especially in the real estate, I have a lot of real estate folks that follow me, probably because we're friends. And I see them talk about this, like they're like, the 10-80-10's changed my life. You know, I used to buy a house and then I'd flip it and I'd do all the renos and I'd deal with everything. Now I come in, I set the frame, here's what we're going to build, here's the budget, here's the thing. I give that to somebody. I go off and work on another project because that's where the real money is going to be made, is finding the next deal. not demolishing something. And then when it's kind of like towards the end, they'll come back in, and that way you build capacity, you build a team. And that 10-80-10 rule has allowed me multiple companies to be able to scale, because you get to do the thing that you're uniquely qualified to do, which is the vision and the ideation and solving problems, and then really let your team, by empowering them, right? Not jumping in to solve little problems. And then the end is the integration where everything comes together and it's like rubber meets the road.
I've made the mistake of doing like the 1090 rule many times. Where like, and then I get
the 1090 zero.
Yeah, 1090 zero. I get done and I'm like, this is not anything like what I wanted. What this is, and it's already been launched, right? And I'm like, like whether it's a real estate thing or a business thing, or I've done the 90-10-0 rule, you know. So I just show up and I'm like, you guys just wasted 90% of your time. This is not nothing like I wanted.
What I said.
And they're like, well, you never told us what you wanted. I'm like, you're right. 100%.
So I'll give you this on my phone. I have a picture, and I'll show it to you guys after. We were doing some renos in my house, and the designer had photos of all the finished work printed off and stuck to all the walls where the work was being done. And I took a photo for that reason. Why did she do this? Is because any of the trades that were coming into the home to work on it could see the 3D renderings of the finished product. So just think how powerful that idea is that she knew that left to their own decisions, they're going to put a plug in the wrong place. They're going to use the wrong kind of material for this thing. But she had next to each project done visual 3D diagrams of what we were doing so that everybody could see what done look like. And I think that idea is also, and that's a skill, like being able to communicate vision with clarity. That's a skill people need to develop.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I was putting together like a workbook a few weeks ago just for something for the Better Life Tribe. And I had one page where I worked on one single page and I made it perfect the way I wanted to, but then we had to replicate it 15 different ways. And so I don't know if Kat's in here still, but yeah, there she is. I was like, hey Kat, I hate to ask you this, but can you make 15 versions of this that are all completely different, but here's the look? And yeah, like later in the day, she shoots back and all of them were done exactly as I wanted, because the first one I just defined exactly as I wanted.
Nailed it.
Yeah, so like that was a great it just worked versus like, hey Kat, can you invent something and figure it out? And then it would come back to me and I've been like, so yeah, huge fan of that.
Slow is fast sometimes.
Slow is fast. This is maybe I don't know. I'll ask this one. Do you ever get depressed or down? Do you have like entrepreneurial bipolarism like a lot of us do? Like, how do you deal with it?
So I'll tell you what it's been like for me. Here's the feeling that causes people to stay stuck, and it's rumination. Do you guys know what ruminating is? It's actually, it's a muscle you can develop, and unfortunately, you can either use it for good or you can use it for bad. You can use the concept of rumination for positivity, which is affirmations, right? Like people that turn to a daily practice of some sorts, prayer or whatever it is, to continuously refine and remind the vision we want to have. That's positive. The alternative is we go into a negative spiral, especially in our minds. So back in the day, 10, 15 years ago, I would get to a place in my feelings, in my work, whatever was going on, where it would get so bad that I knew I wasn't going to be good for anybody else. So I'd actually just disconnect. Sometimes I'd lie and say I'd have the flu, or I would just clear my calendar or whatever, and I would just be by myself. And usually that looked like, if I was trying to be productive, I would, clean stuff up, clean folders up, use that time to like get things better, but not do anything new. When it was even worse, I would just lay in bed and watch like TV shows. This is like really before Netflix. I would just like buy every season of House, Lost. Like I would just binge. I remember sometimes my wife would come in the bedroom. She's like, uh-oh. And I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. She's like, another one of these. And I'm like, yeah. And it's funny because I couldn't even explain what it was. It was like a dark cloud. And what happened is back then it would last 4 days. If it was bad, 3 days, 2 days. And I went from having bad weeks to having bad days to having bad, situations to now it's just moments. So what I've done for me is over the years, I've just tried to figure out what are the things I can do to get out of the funk. And that's the way I look at it. I can have a positive spiral upwards of opportunity and abundance and all these things, or I can have a negative one, but I can at least identify when it happens. And it's funny because some of them are literally mind worms. They're like this is the craziest thing. The other day I'm at the gym and the guy at the front desk said, "Hey, Dan, you got a few minutes?" And I was like, "Well, I got to get this workout done." "Why?" And he goes, "Hey man, when, before you leave, can you stop by? I want to talk to you." No issue. And then I'm working out, and for some reason, I start thinking he's mad at me. Like, I literally was like, this guy, his name's Brett. Brett's mad at me. And I'm like, Dan, why are you, okay, as true as that could be, the opposite is equally true. This is so ridiculous. And I watched myself do this. So in that moment, I went to positivity. What's the alternative? API, I call it, assume positive intent. So what's the alternative? The alternative is he's in a dark spot and he needs my help. And I get an opportunity to help him out. He probably watches my content. Something might have happened. He wants to ask me about it. And at the very end, got all dressed up, went to the front desk. He wasn't there. Asked the guy, "Can you find Brett?" He brought Brett over. I was like, "Hey man, you want to talk?" He goes, "Yeah." And guess what? He needed my help. And I just laughed at myself because it had been a while since I kind of felt that, where I like saw myself go into a negative spiral for no good reason. And so now I continuously focus on my habits and my routines, because I know the power of staying in that positivity is for consistency and momentum is so important. That's why, like, a lot of people ask me what I do to be successful. It's not what I do. It's what I don't do. I don't drink. I don't gamble. I don't vape. I don't do drugs. I don't smoke weed. I don't, and some people are like, "Well, that doesn't sound very fun." Follow me on Instagram. I have a lot of fun. Like I just do. I just don't do things that I know take me away from being present. And I think sometimes I would rather be in my feelings to try to figure out what I got to do to get through that than to mask it and numb it. Because every time I've done that in the past, especially with my addictive personality, I'm just prolonging the day where I can actually expand. And I just don't want to do that. So I definitely have bad moments, but I don't have bad days anymore. And I definitely don't have bad weeks, or I don't sit there and binge watch TVs and pretend like bad things aren't happening all around me.
That's great, man. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, the funny you say about the wife, because I've had bad, like, a day or two or three, and I'm like, I don't really know why that is at the moment. I feel like I'm spiraling, right? And my wife says the same thing. She's like, "Oh, are you in a mood?"
You're in one of those moods.
Yeah, I'm like, everything's fine. I'll get out of it. I always say I'll pull through.
Oh,
that's
dude,
what I say.
6 months ago, I woke up. I wasn't woken up. It was noon, I remember, and I just didn't want anybody in my house anymore. And and it was like, I have a house manager, I have people, they're all around, and I just got in a mood. And I like, again, that happens maybe once a year, but I was like, I text Betty and I said, "Hey, you got the afternoon off. Please ask everybody else to leave." I asked my wife, "Hey, I don't want to do anything." Like, I just got in this headspace. And for me, I just know I'm not going to be good for anybody. Yeah. So it's almost like protective. Like, I need to protect myself from me. So right now, everybody create some space. We're good. And then I knew, go to the gym. This is how I get out of it, if that's helpful.
Yeah.
I move my body. So it doesn't matter if it's a run, a workout. I always say the pump cures all, just workout. 2, I always remind myself why I'm doing things in the first place. Because sometimes we get free. We're so, I call it lifting our head. Sometimes we're looking at our feet while we're walking, we're doing, and we forget why we're doing this. Yeah. So I always call it lifting my head. I just got to lift my head and go back to the vision, back to my goals, remind myself why I'm doing it, who I'm doing it for. And then the third one is being of service. I've never helped somebody else and been upset. Like, those two feelings, like, it's hard to, so it could be just calling a friend and being like, "Hey man, how you doing?" And they're like, "You know what, man, I'm having a tough week. Tell me about it." And then they're telling you and you're helping them. And then by the end of it, you're like, who just benefited from this? Like, it's the best. So I'm a big fan of, doing those 3 things to try to get out of a mood.
That's cool. For me, I found that when I think about the core of why I get in those moods sometimes, it's almost always, because I have this like fear of rejection, like deep down in my soul. It's almost always, or fear of confrontation. It's kind of the same for me. Whenever I have those moods, it's usually some kind of either a rejection that I've faced, or more likely it's a confrontation I need to have and I don't want to. So like, it's somebody I got to fire, or somebody I got to like talk to and just like tell an employee they're doing a bad job. And as soon as I recognize it, I'm like, oh yeah, this whole thing is just because of that. Then I can pull myself out of it. But a lot of times I'll go a day or two and just not realize why I'm in just a crappy mood. It's almost always because there's something I have to do.
Clarity.
Yeah. And once I get the clarity, it's just fine.
Yeah. So that's the dump part.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just get it out of our heads. Yep. Be clear on the next action. I think a lot of procrastination is just unclear next action.
Agreed. Yeah. I talk about this thing all the time where I call it the MINS, the most important next step. And I'm like, majority of people, like, it doesn't take a month to read a book, but MINS, MINS. It doesn't take a month to read a book, but if you read a book, 5 minutes one day and 20 minutes 4 days later and 30 minutes, 2 weeks later, it'll take you months to read a book. But if you did it every day, so the same is true for business. How do we continually take action every day? Just getting clarity. Most important next step. Now, I was on Graham Stephan's podcast once, and his partner Jack was there. And Jack was like, give me an example of this. I was like, well, what's something you want in your life? He's like, oh, I'd love to have like kids. I'm like, all right, well, what do you got to do to have kids? He goes, well, I got to get married first. I'm like, okay, you got a girlfriend? He's like, no. I'm like, okay, what do you got to do to get a girlfriend? He goes,
I got to start with a girl.
Yeah, I was like, yeah,
need to be in a relationship.
Yeah, be in a relationship. What do you got to do for that? He goes, I got to update my Tinder. I'm like, all right, why don't you do that right now? He's like, well, I got to get a haircut first. I'm like, all right, so what do you got to do to get a haircut? He's like, well, I just schedule it. I'm like, all right, so you're talking about your life, kids, family, like Thanksgiving, Christmas, like this beautiful life you want to have is all dependent on you scheduling a haircut, and you're putting that off because you don't have clarity on the next step. And like his mind like broke. Like I just stopped. I'm just like, oh my, like everything I want in life is to get a haircut.
Yeah, you can connect the dots.
Yeah, and I need people to do that for me sometimes. Like that's why I have coaches in almost everything I pursue, because I want my coach to be like, well, let's get clarity on that. And once you have clarity, it's not too hard to get there.
No.
You mentioned the gym. You're obviously in shape.
I like to work out.
You like to work out. Were you in shape were you ripped before getting rich, or were you rich before getting ripped?
No.
How do the two interplay?
Yeah. So right now I weigh 216 pounds. I used to weigh 265. And again, ask me later, I'll show you the photo, but you wouldn't recognize Dan in the person. Like even when I look at it, I'm like, ugh. And I remember the headspace I was in, right? It was funny because I didn't even think I was big. I was like, I'm normal. There's bigger, there's a bigger people are out there, but I'm not big. And it ate up so much space in my mind and just my self-worth, my self-esteem, that I just decided over the years that I wanted to get better at it. And the truth is I just oscillated my whole life. Like I went 265 down, up, down. So if you just look at the last 20 years, I've just gotten a lot better. And what happened was last December, somebody at the office said, did you know there's 20 million something millionaires, but only 3 million people with visible abs in the US? Huh, that's interesting. So what you're saying is it's rarer to have visible abs than to be a millionaire. I said, well, I should have visible abs then. And I didn't know what I was saying. So I actually went on this journey to get visible abs. So I gave myself 90 days with any goal. These are my 3 rules. 1, reward. So what's the reward? I'm buying myself a Lamborghini. I always wanted the Urus. So that was my reward. The stakes, what happens if I don't hit the goal? I got to enter in a fitness competition as is. No shaving chest, no tan, no nothing. Dad bod, fitness comp. We gave ourselves a 2-hour radius immediately. And then the third part is to tell people. So those are like how I hit my goals. So I thought I was going to be fine. Start the process, dropped a bunch of weight. I started like 231 and about 222, I think I hit a plateau. And I set the goal up that there was no room for error. Like it was aggressive, pounding 2 pounds a week. If I missed a week, like, oh geez, I'm not eating the next week kind of thing. I went 3, almost 4 weeks without losing any weight. I'm 44. Turns out it's a little different when you're in your 40s than when you're in your 20s. And luckily I met a guy at the gym, this friggin' beefcake of a man. He's if you saw him, you'd say the same thing. So whatever. His name's Alan, and Alan showed me a completely different way to train. So we immediately did a cleanse. Then we did 100% macro-based nutrition. So like really understanding where the protein, carbs, and the fats play. And there's actually science behind this. I just thought we just caloric deficit, call it a day. Calories are definitely your body reacts completely different based on your macros. And then progressive overload training, which is hilarious because I know a lot of people that train, but Alan's rule is simple. It's such a simple concept. If you lift the same, you look the same. So the whole philosophy of progressive overload is the volume that you lift gets bigger, which means your body responds. And by the 90th day, I started in December, by March, I had dropped almost down to 6% body fat, 197 pounds. Wow. Yeah, I was rip.
Yeah.
Definitely not sustainable long term. But I then did what's called a reverse diet. So what's interesting is if you do a body recomp, and my mind was so sharp. Like if you guys want to like feel spirit, I think there's a reason why Jesus went into the desert for 40 days of fasting. There was just something like I could feel the energy. And then what happens is you body recomp. So you take all the fat off your body, and then when you build it back up, then essentially all the good food goes in the right muscles in the right place. And I'm leaner and bigger now than I weigh almost the same like before, but I look completely different. So in regards to the money side, I made my money before I was healthy-ish. And then I just kept reinvesting in it to try to figure it out. Since I've been healthy, my net worth is probably doubled. It's kind of bananas.
You think there's a strong connection between wealth
100%.
and health?
Confidence. Like I'm not special. I have all the same insecurities as everybody else. But because of the consistency I have around my nutrition, the food I put in my mouth, my workout routines, my energy levels, I just have more to give. So it's just a direct correlation of like, how do you feel? If you feel unstoppable, it'll show up. So I call it quiet confidence, right? You go into a meeting, you literally don't have to say anything, but you just feel confident because you've kept the commitments you made to yourself in private. That's what eats away at your confidence. It's every time you know, today I'm going to work out and you don't. Today I'm not going to eat dessert and you do. You know, it's like that's what erodes that confidence that comes across in an email, a response. You're thinking, I should go on this guy's podcast. I kind of know him, but I really don't know him. I should text him. But then you convince yourself not to. Like it's all those little like death by 1,000 paper cuts of insecurities that actually stops you from playing a bigger game. And when I look at the big moves that I made because of that confidence, because of how I was feeling, that's where the real wealth came from.
I'm guessing you don't change your own oil, right? You don't mow your own lawn?
If I'd embarrass myself if I told you the things I haven't done in a long time.
So that's why I want to ask this question is how do you, because this is a question people ask me a lot. I outsource a lot. I have a house manager. I do similar things, right? They say, well, what about your kids? They're not going to see their dad changing his own oil or mowing the lawn. What do you think that's teaching your kids? So how do you answer that?
Oh, I love this. And it's because they're here and we got it on camera. So this is the mindset of rich people that they're worried about raising entitled kids. Does that make sense? You guys have wealth, you have children. Biggest fear is I don't want to raise these little spoiled brats. Okay. So then, but you also want to live life. Maybe you want to stay in a nice hotel. Maybe you want to rent really nice houses. Maybe you might want to give yourself the gift of flying private. And what are you going to tell your kids to take the Greyhound bus while you jump on a PJ? Like, what are we going to do? Because I did the coach while I was in business class, right? And then I got in trouble with the airlines one time. They were like, you can't do that. You're supposed to be back there. And I'm like, what? Anyway, so I don't know, I have my own plane. That solves that. But it's, you know, I had to figure out, like, how do you do it? And like, oh, what do I do? At 13 years old, do I send my kids off into the woods and tell it, figure your way home? Like, am I going to do that angle? So here's what I've realized. And I realized it pretty young when they were 5. If you just let the world react to your children, they will go through enough issues. I was at daycare, okay, watching my kids get ready. I picked them up and every other parent was sitting there doing the shoes, putting the jackets on, putting their little gloves on. I seen it. And I would just sit there with my 2 boys. You can ask them, they're here. I have never buttoned up their jacket ever in the history of them being with me. I've never put their gloves on their hands. I've never tied their shoes. These are like, and even today, okay, we're going out. We do prime hunting. Anybody got like young boys into prime? So okay, thank you. So we were prime hunting and
wait, what is prime hunting?
Prime, I don't want to give them a shout, but it's, you know, it's a product. Okay. Some of the younger kids are into the prime. They're smiling over there. So we found, I guess, yeah, it's Prime Hydrate. It's like energy drink. It's like Mr. Beast has Feastables. So in Canada, we have limited flavor. So we always go prime hunting. So we found them, but we're at the store and we're going to check out. And I sat back and I let them check out. And like most parents would have checked out, these are the self-checkout. And they were like, should we get a bag? I'm like, should you get a bag? Like, I don't know. Like I literally act like I don't know what they're saying. And I just watched them. And then Sam's with me. He's like, well, how are they going to pay? I said, they know how to use my phone. And then they were trying to figure it out. And I just sat back. And I'm not even joking. I don't want to throw you on the bus, Sam. but they couldn't figure out how to scan to pay. And Sam went over, grabbed the phone and swiped it. And I laughed. I said, dude, he's like, what? I was like, you just did the thing I just said that we don't do to help our kids figure out how to be independent little people. And what one of my mentors told me a long time ago, he said, if you want, because he was very wealthy. He actually used to work for Bill Gates. And he said, because he had 2 kids that were just awesome, well-adjusted, super kind, all that stuff. I said, how did you raise these incredible kids? He said, my job is to not show them. I want to show them how the rest of the world is. So he said, just don't shelter them from it. So ever since they were young, we've done trips to Haiti. We do work in the community. So my kids, I mean, just literally before we got here, Max took his own money to buy hot chocolate for a guy on the street.
That's awesome.
Yeah, clap that up.
Yeah,
clap that up. He wanted to do it. And I think that to me is, they don't see their dad change his oil or mow his lawn. No, that's not character building. Character building is real character building. Let them experience the world. Don't bubble wrap them. Don't do everything for them. And you can start at quite a young age and you'd be surprised. And the reason I'm like this is because I read Henry Ford's biography. Is it this Titan, maybe? That was Henry Ford's?
I think so.
It's a big one. Anyways, what is it? Maybe My Life's Work? Was there another one? Okay, it might have been the Henry Ford one. But anyways, in the book, was it Henry Ford? No, it was Rockefeller. Sorry, Titan. So Rockefeller, he's 12 or 13. His dad's a bit of a charlatan, okay? So he's always gone. He comes back after being gone for almost a year, gives Rockefeller $20,000 and says, build your mom a home. As a 13-year-old real estate, folks, he figured out how to get a home built for his mom. Wow. Our kids can do way more. Like you could, they're capable and we just protect them. So that's my way, is like, whether they see me, but they've also seen me do CrossFit, Ironmans, ultras, they've seen me suffer. So it's not about not seeing that part of doing hard things. It's about letting them discover on their own their capability and then celebrating that.
Yeah, that's really good. I have a buddy who always says, Scott Donald, he always says, treat your kids 3 years older than they are. And I like that idea because most people treat their kids 3 years younger than they are. So they're like, again, buttoning up their coat because their 2-year-old needs their help button up their coat. So then they do it to your 5-year-old. But instead it's like, well, what would your 8-year-old do? Like, what would an 8-year-old do? Let's have them do that. And if you treat them that, they'll rise to that occasion usually.
I love that.
Yeah, treat them 3 years older than you should.
So
your
good.
private jet. Did you buy that because it's a luxury? Does it actually help you buy back your time?
Oh, it's the ultimate. There's no time machine. It's the ultimate time machine.
You think it makes you more money than it costs?
Okay, so let's talk about this. This is a great conversation. Had a friend of mine out of Nashville, and when he found out I got a jet, he was like, man, I had a jet. I flew a lot last year. He spent like $500,000 flying private. And he goes, I just couldn't. He was a real estate guy as well. He said, I just couldn't keep doing it because every time I'd write this check, I'd go, I could have bought this apartment building or I could have done this deal. And I was like, well, what did you do? And he's like, well, I took it. We went to the Super Bowl. I went and did some stuff and speaking. And I'm like, oh, you used it to go waste your time. And he goes, what do you mean? I go, I use my plane to buy back my time to then reinvest it in making me a lot more money. So I do not use it for fun. Like I just don't. Maybe every time I use it, it's because I'm speaking. And if I couldn't, I wouldn't be able to do it. Right. So like a big reason of where I live in the center of British Columbia between Calgary and Vancouver. And so everything, like most smaller towns, they have a puddle jumper, and I just wouldn't be able to say yes to as many opportunities as I do. So I literally don't really use it unless it's going to make us money. And the good news is I'm in a business where everything, if you just try a little hard, there's ways to make money. But that's just where I'm at right now because like I want to honor the principle of like buying back your time to do more. But yeah, when I told that to my friend, he's like, oh, so you turned an expense into an asset. And I'm like, yeah, dude, what are you doing, man? Like you should have been buying back your time to go look at more deals, not buying back your time to go on vacation.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you're not at that level where that cash flow isn't that serious, then don't do that. But I think a lot of folks, if they give themselves permission, they probably could find opportunities Even, I mean, honestly, if you fly private and you have 8 people with you, you can actually fly relatively close to what it would cost for business. And then you're on your own schedule. And that's the big thing. Opportunities. Dude, the podcast that we did was because I had the plane and I didn't have to fly out, and we did that one, and that ended up being an incredible gift. So I just think that's the way I look at everything is if I'm going to deploy a resource, what's the ROI on it? And if I'm not, then I'm okay. It's pure fun and I know what it is, but I'm not wasteful either.
Beautiful. Top 3 pieces of advice you'd give someone starting their very first business.
Top 3. Here's the advice most people wouldn't hear about starting their own first business. First thing is the business is started the moment you sell something to somebody. So run as fast as you humanly possibly can to get somebody to pay you for what you got. And you don't have to even have it. You don't have to have done it before. Just try to have a conversation where somebody gives you money. That's the biggest advice. The first thing, I mentor a bunch of youth. I don't even talk about their fancy business idea until they show me they can sell something to somebody as fast as humanly possible. So that's 1. 2, and this is from Jim Rohn, work harder on yourself than you do on your business. Like I go into my own companies and I talk to my teams and I go, can you please, please, please work harder on yourself than you do in your job? Like I'm the owner. I'm telling you, work harder on you than you do in the job. And they're like, that makes no sense. I'll get fired if I don't do the job. No, it actually makes more sense if you walk through the thinking of it. If you put yourself first and you're selfish about developing yourself, you'll be better for the team, which makes it easier on all of us. You know, it's like, well, what's being better? I don't know, more productive, planning better. Like those sound like great skills I'd love for you to bring to the team. So most people wouldn't probably be told to do that. They're not teaching that at the economic, government counselor down the street. And then the third thing is get around people that have done it before as fast as you possibly can. This is why these rooms, you guys all know, it's why you're here. Being in rooms like this are accelerants to your success. Period, full stop. If I want to start a restaurant and I can get anybody, think about a restaurant. Most people are like, I need $2 million to start a restaurant. No, you don't. You need to make food and sell it to somebody. And you can sell the tickets to the food before you even make it. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, host people in your house. That's illegal. Oh, if we had to follow the letter of the law to start a business, no business would ever be started in the history of the world. Think about this. We're breaking probably 8, like all these laws, just doing anything. When we
like
start.
Uber and Airbnb and all
no,
that. They're all
I'm
illegal.
talking about like labor laws. Like your friend's helping you out, you're not paying them. Like that's probably illegal in some states. So that to me would be the 3 things I would just tell people to go. So it's like start a restaurant, sell tickets to your fancy dinner at your house, 8 people, boom, go to the market, get a food truck. There's like all these stages before you ever get to a restaurant. Work harder on yourself, like become passionate around the craft of cooking food and loving food. Like just get the top 5 books. It's so bananas to me that people are like, I want to do this for a profession. What are the top 5 books in that industry? I don't know. Okay. Do you know that the average student coming out of university has $110,000 in debt for a 4-year degree? The average person coming out with that debt makes $38,000 a year on average. And yet they can't tell you the top 5 books in the category of the thing they studied. We don't have to make this complicated. And then get around people that are going to pull you up when you're feeling down.
Beautiful. All right. Somebody wants to hire, they need to expand their team. Top down or bottom up? In other words, you hire the very low bottom, like bookkeeper or assistant, or do you hire the CEO that's going to run your company? Oh,
so controversial. This one is really, most people are not going to agree with me on this, but I'm going to walk you through the different path. When you start, you only can start bottom up because you don't have the capital. You don't have the resources. Yeah. Okay. When you're when you're in this room, start top down. Yeah. And that's what happens is when you start and you have nothing, you start bottom up because you got to put extra hours to trade up the skills, the knowledge, the experience. You're not even good at anything. So really you can't even afford to pay somebody a lot of money because what if you hire the wrong person because you're not good at hiring yet? It's very expensive. What happens though is most entrepreneurs don't transition when they actually have resources. They're making $500,000 a year in profit, and then they start something new and they execute the same game plan. Yep. So the game plan you should be executing when you're making $500,000 a year is to literally start from the top and have them build the bottom. And that's how I've built all my companies.
That's how I built Open Door Capital. I hired the CEO and then they built the company and it worked.
Dude, it's like, it's a cheat code that once you do it once, you're like, wow, I've been working so hard.
Yeah.
But the whole point is to start at the bottom to work your way up so that you understand the system, and then you earn the opportunity to then go top bottom. Yeah. So depending, right time, right action, right context matters. That's the way I think about it.
How do you feel about virtual assistants overseas? Is that all right? Do you think people should only have local? Like,
obviously I got to pick the focus of a book. And, you know, the big idea in my book is, you know, start with the executive assistant. I really believe in the term executive assistant as an earned term. Like, they're an executive, they're a partner if you do it right. The virtual assistant, I think, is a capacity enabler, not necessarily an ownership thing. So it can work. It's just so much more work, right? It's like when people say, like, you know, it costs nothing. It's like, well, that's like me giving you a puppy. The puppy's not free, even if I give it to you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, if anybody have a puppy? I had a puppy, almost went home. Are you guys not going to raise your hand no matter how many times I ask? Who's had a puppy in their home? All right. My wife almost gave back our puppy 3 times. Like, I'm talking like meaningfully, it's got to go. Okay. And Blaze has been with us for 2 years now. So trust me, I fought hard to keep him. And that's what I mean by sometimes with and the boys are so happy over there. A virtual assistant can be the same way. They can be valuable. It just takes a lot of effort to manage them. Whereas a real executive assistant. So I think of, like, you know, a personal assistant is different than virtual assistant is different than administrative assistant or office manager, different than executive assistant, and could even be different than a chief of staff, right? And you have different levels of folks in your world that buy back your time. So virtual assistants can actually be, so it's funny, is my executive assistant, Anne, has a team of virtual assistants, but she manages them for capacity and throughput, not necessarily for ownership of outcomes, because that requires a level of intimacy around the individual and preferences that sometimes is not present when people are so far removed, and legal infrastructure. So that's the other part that people don't think about. You know, right or wrong, when people join my team in any one of my companies, I'm very clear. If you break the law, you will go to jail. Period, full stop. There's no 2 strikes. There's no 3. Like, if you steal from me, the police will be involved. It's hard to reinforce laws like that in third world countries. So that's the downside, is there's certain types of activities that you should not, if you want to protect yourself, reduce what's called your attack vector. And it happens all the time. I had a client maybe 6 months ago, 375 grand, just slow $1,700 invoices that showed up, and he just kept approving it in Pluto. Just approve. And then finally somebody, a CFO, did like kind of saw something, was like, what is this? Like, I don't know. And then they found out it was a company of the assistant that they just kept adding invoices to and got paid for like marketing administrative stuff. So, you know, it adds up.
I heard recently a story. It was just some guy just started sending like $1,000 bills to like GE, and they just kept paying him. They just pay it.
That used to be a scam back in the day. Yeah, it's a real scam. My dad used to get them all the time in the mail.
Yeah.
And the finance team would just like get the looks legit and just pay it.
Just pay it, yeah. Because like those guys are they're not thinking like ownership. No, you gotta
put it's literally gotta be like $897. And they're like, just pay it.
Okay, just pay it, yeah. It makes me wonder, I mean, I have a management company. We manage just thousands of rental properties. I'm like, how many bills are we paying? I mean, because we can't, I mean, maybe they know every single one, but they just get thousands and thousands of bills a month.
Do you want to get a PO process in place at some point where every transaction has somebody that approves it at the bottom and just rolls up? That's what we do.
That makes sense. When hiring an assistant, what are the top skills somebody should be looking for in that person?
The opposite of you. So this is where everybody gets it wrong when they hire an assistant. You want to find somebody that's polar opposite to you. Okay, think about it. It's like if you hire somebody who's just like you, that's a mistake. It's like, I like this person. No. You should. This is not somebody you want to hang out with and be friends. If that's a byproduct, awesome. But you want somebody that complements you, where you're maybe more visionary and creative. They grab all these pieces out of the air and kind of land the plane and hold you to some level of a timeline. And, you know, sometimes I start telling stories and Anne's like, focus. We have work to do. We got approvals to do. I'm like, sometimes I'll be like, give me 5 minutes. I just want to tell you this crazy story. She's like, okay. She loves them just as much as I like telling them. But yeah, I think, so that's why I'm a big fan of the Colby A personality assessment. So if you've never heard of it, it's got 4 dimensions, and you want to almost find the opposite of you, like a key and a lock, right? Where they're like high follow through, you're low, they're higher fact finder, et cetera. And yeah, and then I would say typing speed and communication. So I'm horrible in typing communication, better with voice. Okay, so I do a lot of voice messages. That was a big unlock for me about a decade ago of using voice. So Voxer, iMessage voice, even Slack voice. I'm a voice person, but I like people to communicate to me in bulleted, written summaries.
I feel bad, but I tell my team that too. Like Kat in the back, that's my EA back there. Kat.
No, like got connected.
That's what I talk to. I'm like, I'll send you voice memos. I don't want to get them back.
Yeah,
so I won't listen to them.
No, and I think this is literally your opportunity to express your preferences.
Yep.
Right. If you want to have a great relationship with an executive assistant, you have to tell them from day one, here's how we're going to win. If you allow me to do this and you reply like this, it's always going to be awesome, because my written form lacks empathy. Like I just know that. I'm not like, I don't slow it down, but my voice comes with the tonality that the word doesn't. And it just saved me a lot of emotional shrapnel over the years. So I would say, yeah, really great communication skills. And for the most, and then just, they got to be able to manage projects. Just manage a lot of projects. They have to have lists amongst lists. One of my assistants back in the day, Robin, she used to, remember I was interviewing, and I was like, what's your process for managing projects? And she's like, I've got lists of lists of lists. And she wasn't joking. I'm talking like, when I saw her, like the way she managed her life, we're talking binders, colors, highlighters. It was a work of art. And it turns out like even operators like COOs, they're similar, right? They're the ones that love to spend their days in Notion or tools like that. I don't even have logins to any of my, they're in my login software. I just personally, like, people send me links to like a HubSpot link. I'm like, don't know how to get in there. And they're like, what are you talking about? Literally have your assistant reset your password on your apps. Like, some of us need to just get out of the tools. Yeah. Then you can't help. Because every time you help, you're telling your team, I don't trust you. Or, you know, and you think you're doing it right, but you're not, because you're not building the machine that runs the machine.
Yeah.
See, I spend all my time building the machine that runs the machine because I don't want to be in the machine. Right?
It's good, man. Let's go to the other end of the spectrum then. Let's go CEO. You want to hire from the top down. How do you find that, like, that A player, that CEO level person, or like somebody who can actually run your company?
Yeah. This is where most people get it wrong when hiring CEOs or even a general manager, is they have somebody on their team that's been with them for a while. They trust them, which is key. And they see in them more than even that person sees in themselves, which is beautiful. For a lot of us, we had a person show up. I don't know about you guys, but I had somebody show up in my life and did that for me. He had a belief in my capabilities way beyond what I was believing about myself at the time. Unfortunately, though, when we're talking companies and like real money, like millions of dollars, those people might mean well. They just can't learn fast enough to actually take advantage of these opportunities. And more likely than not, 9 times out of 10, you have to remove them in the future from the company. So I've just learned to stop doing that. Instead, what I prefer to do, and so I buy a software company every month right now. So Big Band Software is my $100 million holdco, my partner.
Will you buy a software company?
We buy a software company, yeah.
Dude.
Yeah.
All right.
But I mean, it's a system and a process, right? We have a team for acquisition. We look at deals. I know software I've been doing for 27 years. Like, it's just like you guys could buy an apartment building every month.
Yeah, I guess I buy a property about once a month. Yeah. So.
It's literally, it sounds cool, but crazy, it's not. Yeah. If that's all you've ever done, it's all I've ever done. But what were we talking about?
Hiring CEOs or top level people.
So because I do that, we hire a lot of CEOs. My rule is I try to find the number 2 at the number 1 company in the space. So if I was buying a software to manage passwords, I would go, well, who are all the password management software out there? And who's the number 2 in command at these companies? And I would hire the second guy, because what happens is those people are capable, but for them to ever become number 1, they got to wait for somebody to move on or, decide they don't want to do it anymore. And that could take never. That might never happen. I learned that strategy by Richard Branson. So I spend a week with him in Switzerland at his home. And I remember asking him this same question, like, how do you have 400 companies in the Virgin Group of companies? And he has 2 CEOs that runs the Virgin Group of companies. And I remember, because we were talking about like management and leadership, and And I said, do you sit on any boards? He goes, no, I find them boring. He literally said that to me. I remember I thought it was such a funny thing to say. He goes, they're very boring. So we're here skiing, and even one of the CEOs flew in on a helicopter to meet with them for breakfast because Richard doesn't go to board meetings, and he wanted him to know about the new project they were working on. They just bought some new Dreamliners about a decade ago. And he's the one that said it to me. I said, well, how did you, they had just launched Virgin Cruises. And I said, well, how did you bring that guy, for example, where did you find him? And he said, oh, he's the COO at Carnival. It's like, oh my gosh. So what I do as fast as possible in every one of my companies, I try to build a talent acquisition team in the company. So if you're hiring more than 12 people a year in your business, you should have a dedicated person on just acquiring talent. And I have it centralized now. I have a head of people, Wayne, who manages recruiting for all my companies because we've built a very structured system. Anything director level and above, we go outbound. I don't want anybody that's unemployed to apply for a position that's director level and above. So we identify 5 companies that we think have the talent, and we will go outbound to every one of those companies through LinkedIn, through referrals, through email. And that's a motion, right? Just like you do outbound for buying properties, we do it for talent, and that's how we do the CEO hiring.
Fascinating. And how much of training do you have to personally do, or do you not do much of that with those CEOs? Are you just...
No, that's actually where I spend my time. I'm a talent development guy. That's like either I do it with clients I coach or I do it with my executives, but I do leadership training every Monday for my internal teams. And pretty much even when I run my events, so I do a couples retreat. I was just telling you we're going to Hawaii next March. I invite all my CEOs and their spouses to that. So those are kind of like, I'm always trying to integrate my life where I have things where I'm doing, maybe I'm speaking at an event. I'm keynoting John Maxwell. 3 CEOs are coming to that event. So I look at my calendar to spend time with people. But a lot of that is more mentorship than anything, not training. These people are very capable, and it's more, I believe it's what's caught, not taught. Like, as much as I think what I'm sharing is pretty valuable, you guys are going to learn more amongst yourselves talking to each other at break or at dinner tonight or at the baseball game than, what's shared on stage. So I like to bring my CEOs around me. Wake surfing's my favorite. Yeah. Like I've done more business in the back of my wake surfing boat than, and I love being there talking shop. So, the C-level folks, they need to be, it's proximity. You just got to pump their tires, tell them they're awesome. And most of the time it's just networking. Like they need an introduction to a person that they just don't have that relationship.
Do you offer equity to all your CEOs?
100%. A long time ago, one of my mentors, this guy named Steve, very wealthy tech CEO, he goes, you can either be short-term greedy or long-term greedy. And he goes, short-term greedy is trying to fight for every penny in the deal today. He goes, and you can make money doing that, Dan, but then you're known as the guy that's short-term greedy. And what happens is you'll never know the doors that got shut in your face down the road because you have a reputation that nobody can make money with you. If you become the guy where the brand, the essence is anytime somebody does business with you, they make money, you'll have an army of people lining up to collaborate with you. So every one of my companies, like literally my mantra, and you can ask Sam because I said it to him all the time. I want you to be rich. I want you to be rich. Help me help you be rich. I want you to make millions of dollars. You have to. Because if you do, then we win. Yeah. And that's just that's always been my philosophy. I learned that through, I think, being in the tech industry where equity is kind of part of the playbook. And, I'm proud. I've made a lot of people millions of dollars and I want to do that. I just think it's just a funner place to live where you wake up every day and just ask yourself, how can I create more wealth amongst the people I care about? It's funny. I was coaching this guy, Tom, once. He's one of my private clients. And one of the exercises I do is really getting clear on 25 years, what we want to achieve. And this guy was already wealthy. And we did a visualization exercise. It's quite different than what most people do. And he comes back and he kind of shows me his output. And it was a lot of stuff, as you can imagine. And there was no people. And I said, Tom, you want to create this kind of wealth thing? It was like $6 billion. Yep. Well, where's all the millionaires you've made? Is what do you mean? I said, well, dude, you can't make $6 billion and nobody else gets rich. Like it's impossible, man. Like, this. He's like, I never thought about it. And I said, well, redo this. Like, I want you to get excited, not about you, dude. Your life doesn't change that much at a certain point, right? The plane's cool, but other than that, like, if it's not about seeing other people kind of elevate and expand, then I just don't get where you're going to find the energy, because that's going to be really hard.
Yeah.
And you're not going to do hard just for you. Trust me. I can't. I've never had the energy source where if it was just Dan getting richer, I would have just been like, I don't care that much.
Yeah.
But man, do I ever care when it's other people I care a lot about that are on the receiving end of that. So
I was complaining to a friend yesterday. I was just texting some friend about just some drama that I'm dealing with in business and how hard it is. And I said, man, trying to be a billionaire is hard. And I'm like, if it were just me, I would just stop the pursuit.
Totally.
I'm good enough. I'm just fine. But I got 150 people now that rely on me, and I want a lot of them to be millionaires. So yeah, I try to remember that it's not just me anymore.
No.
So
and I think the hard is that's good.
Yeah.
I'd be worried if you said it wasn't.
Yeah.
Right. Bigger the problem, the bigger the life.
Yeah. And they get progressively bigger all the time. And
but that's actually, like, to me, that's what I love about entrepreneurship, is that it is it's a feedback loop.
Yeah.
If I want to be better, then I got to go find, like, if it's not hard, then I'm not doing the right thing. That's why I have a problem with this, like, hustle culture of just being busy.
Yeah.
If there's nothing you're doing in your busyness that actually expands you because it's hard, then it's called a distraction.
Yeah. To go full circle, it's back to what your buddy taught you in the gym, right? About the progressive, what do we call that?
Progressive overload.
Yeah.
Lift the same, look the same.
Yeah. So if
your problems are the same size, you're not growing.
Yeah. Deep, man. All right. Moving on to the next segment of the show. We're going to start wrapping things up. I asked you this back a year ago when you were on, but I'll ask them again now in case they've changed. It's called the 3-2-1 pivot. So we're talking about your life's going in one direction. Something makes it pivot. So what are 3 books? We'll start with 3 books that have changed the direction of your life.
The one that I'm on a mission right now to give away 10,000 copies of is Think and Grow Rich. And it took me 7 years to discover that book when I started the entrepreneurial journey. But once I read it, I realized I'd been doing it the hard way. Because, like, there's the activity of just doing, but without a vision and a belief system and a peer group and a mastermind, all these things, it can feel pretty lonely.
Yeah.
So that book really got me outside of just the success hamster wheel and really made it about energy and frequency. And my philosophy now is that the world isn't as it is. The world is as I am. So if I want the world to be better, I got to be better. That I can control. Bring that on. So that was a big one for me. The first book I ever read was called Love is a Killer App by a guy named Tim Sanders. It's not well known, and it shifted my whole life. I wasn't even a reader. I didn't read a business book till I was 23, and I started as an entrepreneur at 17. So I was kind of late to the game. And the only reason I read the book is I'm a software guy, and it was called Love is a Killer App. So that's kind of a techie nerd thing. He used to be the chief visionary officer at Yahoo. And it wasn't even a physical book. It was a CD. So I listened to it. Because I had, with my ADHD, I'd never read my whole life. So I'm like, I used to read computer books to learn how to code, but I could never read books. And that fundamentally shifted everything. That book just set the foundation. It was very much a how to influence friends kind of book. That was a big game changer. And so I'm a little woo. Okay. So I just want people to know spiritually and just like manifestation, all that stuff. There's a book that very few people know about that I think is one of my favorites on the topic of creating and energy. And it's called The Happy Pocket Full of Money. Has anybody read Happy Pocket Full of Money?
Happy Pocket Full of Money.
It's a cool book. Yeah, I'm telling you guys, if you're into, the law of attraction, Dan said that. Yeah, I said that. Yeah, it's just science. Anyways, he's got a really great philosophy. The writing style is cool. And I just reread it probably every 5 years. But yeah, I spent more time. So what I did about 3 years ago is I took Think and Grow Rich. I fed it to Chet GPT, my buddy Chet. Yeah. And I said, list all the books referenced in that book. And then I went through each one of those books and I said, list all the books referenced in those books. And then I got a list of, I think it was like 200 some books. And I've only read from that list in the last 3 years. So when people are like, you should read this new book. I haven't, I just don't.
Yeah.
Because I'm still working through. But we're talking like Wallace Wattles, like old school stuff, right? Ernest Holmes, some really legendary stuff, a lot of scripture. I mean, it's cool when you look at kind of the evolution of the written word from, philosophy to, well, religion, philosophy, poetry, personal development. It's kind of a new thing.
Yeah.
Like 150 years ago kind of thing, late 1800s. It's kind of neat. So yeah, books have really shaped and pivoted my life.
Beautiful. What about people? 2 pivot people that have changed your life.
One guy named Jason Gaynard. So Jason Gaynard created an event called Mastermind Talks. No different than this, a mastermind. And it's funny because he cold emailed me 10 years ago. And at the time, I went online, he had no profile. Like, you ever know those profiles that have no image? That's what he had. And I was like, okay, this guy's full of baloney. But he said he had Tim Ferriss speaking at his event. So I messaged Tim. I said, Tim, are you speaking at this event? He goes, I am. I don't know the guy. He bought, I think it was like $100,000 worth of his book. And that got him a keynote. And then he said, Clay Bear, another friend of mine, was speaking there. I messaged Clay, hey, Clay, you speaking at this event? Yeah, but I don't know the guy. He said Tim was speaking there. I was like, okay. And then I said, yes, worst case, I go see my friends and it doesn't end up being a great event, but at least I saw my friends. So I went and there's 150 people there. And it literally was a decade ago last year because we celebrated the 10 years. That person I've deferred my friend group to for a decade. Where I live today, all my best friends, the people I predominantly do my life with, our families vacation together. We travel the world together. I met Taki Moore. I don't know if you know Taki. Yeah, everybody knows of Taki,
yep,
but
exactly
yeah. So I'm going to Australia in December. Like, all these people that have had profound impacts. The reason I wrote my book, the why I started coaching. These are all people I met at that event through Jason Gaynard.
That's cool.
So I give him flowers every time I see him for that. And then another one, because there's been so many. I mean, I'll never stop telling the story about Brian.
Is that the
guard? Yeah. I got in trouble. I was in jail the second time. I was in adult prison, juvenile section, and I got in a fight, got thrown in the hole. And on the third day, this guard, Brian, super disappointed, pulls me out and asked me to follow him. So I just follow him down the hallway. He wasn't saying a whole lot because he was upset. He was on vacation when the fight broke out. And he pulls me in the guard unit. So the guard unit is a place you don't go, especially as an inmate. And there's no other guards around. He asked me to come in this room. And I thought I didn't know what was going to happen. And I almost didn't go in, but I just followed him in. He sat me down, kind of grabbed one of those chairs like that and put it in the corner and pulled a chair in front of me and just looked at me. And he just asked me, he goes, what are you doing in this place? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, what are you doing in jail? And I said, well, I got in a high-speed chase and I got arrested. And he goes, not that. He goes, what are you doing here? And I was like the fight I got in with Kirk and thrown in the hole. He's like, yes. He goes, Dan, I don't understand why you're here. And if nobody's ever told you this, you don't belong here. I see you stay out of trouble. I see you try to finish your homework. I believe in you. And you need to get out of here. And I honestly never want to see you again. In that one conversation, it was like it planted a seed, man. I can still feel it. Like, at that point, I don't think I had another adult ever tell me something like that. That I felt, I honestly at that point didn't feel like I deserved to breathe the air that I was breathing. And here he was saying I see you do well. And I've been here for 10 years and I've seen all these kids come and go and you don't look like them. And I think 2 months later, I got released to rehab. Brian, it's funny because people always want to know, did you ever let Brian know? Does that make sense? You guys would probably. So it took a while because they don't make it easy for inmates to find guards. So, does that make sense? Okay. For a while, I was like, is that his real name? Anyways, this beautiful woman named Mary Ellen, she was a caseworker at the rehab center and she knew who I was talking about. And once I had proven to her that I was going to be sober and not get in trouble, et cetera, she set up a meeting. And Brian didn't remember that conversation. Because he did it all the time. And I just think how lucky I am that he took the time to say it to me, and how lucky that prison was that he said it to the other inmates, and how powerful and beautiful it is that we all have the opportunity to do that for any other person. And I do that. Like, it's my favorite thing to do, is just tell people how incredible they are and believe in them when they definitely don't believe. And I see it, but I also see their giftedness. I see the magic. I see the work they put in. And I just think, how cool is that you do that every day? You can get up and you can literally stop somebody. You could see, I remember Dad was 3 kids in the passport line freaking out, and he was just being Mr. Patient. And I went over and I said, man, those boys are so lucky to have you as a dad. He almost broke down. He's like, what? Who are you? My wife's like, stop doing that. I'm like, he needs to know. That's beautiful. Like, this one's sprawled out. Like, I think I would have grabbed one. I would have held them in the air. And you'll just go on with your life, and you'll forget, and you'll hear. And I guarantee, Brandon, for sure, you've had this where people have said, you said something to me 8 years ago, and we just don't remember, because that's just who we are. But I know why I do that, because of Brian.
Yeah.
So he had a huge impact on my life.
Beautiful. What about a pivot quote? Something that's changed your life, or something you live by?
Marshall Goldsmith wrote an incredible book. It's called What Got You Here Won't Get You There.
Yep.
And I go back to this all the time. Anything I want in my life that I don't have today, I'm just honest with myself that I'm not good enough yet. And it's going to require me to do things that I'm probably not going to want to do. Usually the thing I don't want to give up. That's why I'm really big on vices. I think a lot of people that have hard lines in the sand and say, I would never, that's literally their opportunity for massive transformation. So I'm very big on auditing my beliefs on what is in stone. You know, Joseph Campbell has this great quote that states, the cave you fear to enter most holds the treasure that you've been looking for. And I just think about that all the time. Like, what am I not willing to give up? What am I not willing to look at? What am I not willing to admit? And if I can get honest with myself, that's probably going to be the thing that creates the space for me to add something new. Again, we can't move forward until we clean up the past. And people that do, they end up imploding. They create massive amounts of wealth, and then it blows up in their face. There's a guy, the founder of Fandango, 2 days ago, jumped off a 20-story building.
Really? Dang.
A lot of pain. Takes a lot of pain. Very wealthy person. Just never probably was willing to, our trauma is a book. And what happens is most people get these books and they discover them and they just put them on the shelf because they don't want to look in them. But they're actually meant to be read. They're meant to be studied. They're meant to get to a place where there's no emotional attachment to what happens. I mean, that's why I said earlier, the world will show you where you're not free through people and circumstances and events. And then you decide, why am I upset right now? And am I willing to work through that? So to me, what got me here won't get me there is just a really honest feedback loop to go look in the mirror and say, who do I need to become next?
Let's do the past, present, future questions. What is your advice to your, let's call it 25-year-old self?
Dream bigger, you.
Perfect.
You chicken, man. Go. Yeah.
All right. I like it. What is an action habit? Could be a tool, could be an app, something that's changed your life in the past year, made your life better.
In the past year.
Yeah. Anything that you've done. It could be even a routine, something you're working on, something that's improved your life.
Yeah. Macros.
Okay.
The food side. Yeah.
How much protein?
I eat a lot of protein. That's probably the game that I play. And obviously if you guys look at Sam, you can tell he lifts heavy things and he puts them down and picks them up and puts them down again from time to time. But our whole studio, everybody, we focus on it, but it's not hard. So for example, I go to a restaurant, I just order the protein sides.
Yeah.
It's actually cheaper, by the way. I know it doesn't look cool. You're sitting there and there's a salmon and 2 chicken breasts come next to you, but it tastes delicious.
Yeah.
And then you just front load all your protein. So we were walking around the city and we stopped and we got 40 grams of protein drink from the store plus a protein bar. And we just, it's literally this game of how much protein can you eat.
Yeah.
And if
I've been doing the same thing.
Yeah. And then your body responds. Most people are not eating enough protein. So then they're feeling hungry and they try to not eat because they don't want to overeat, but you're actually going to make it worse because then you're going to binge. So macro-based nutrition has probably been the coolest, funnest thing. And yeah, I mean, I play this game with my boys and I want them to learn it.
Someday, as much as we don't want to admit it, you're going to pass away.
Yeah.
Your two boys are going to be standing over your grave, and they're going to be talking about you. What do you want them to say about you, about their dad?
He had a lot of fun.
He had a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, I think about death probably 12 times a day. I think about it a lot. I'm not scared of it. I don't get upset by it anymore. You know, I'm very realistic how impermanent this all is, how beautiful it all is, how like, it's literally like, you know, especially if you have kids, it's like, man, where did that time go? So, you know, at the end of the day, I would love for them to go like, that was a great role model, you know, like pretty much everything I do, but I'm also like I don't live in this whole like legacy space either. I think there's a part of legacy that's a bit egotistical. I used to quite a bit. I used to talk about it all the time, but I've just come to realize that I'd rather just give everything now, like really give it all my like now. And it's going to be what's going to be without any desire for it to have anything more, because I don't know if I can't control that. So yeah, I just hope they saw me do the work, really just do the work. Yeah. Yeah. Have fun and do the work.
Well, speaking of death, where are you with that? If you don't mind me asking, like, what is God, spirituality, religion? How do you?
God's the fucking coolest. God is so cool. Like, I drive down the street sometimes and I get so emotionally flooded with just how beautiful the moment is. Like the other day I was driving, the boys started singing. I didn't ask them to sing. They started singing. I grew up thinking if I make it to 25, I'm good. Like I didn't expect to have any of this. And I'm just in awe. Like I mean, when people are like, oh, God's not real, I'm like, can you look outside a window, please? Like, I don't know if you've like studied basic science, but if I take a house and I put it in the woods and I don't come back for 400 years, it's just a pile of dirt. Like, this is just first principles thinking. Like, there's a creative nature to this whole thing. And for me, you know, and I do a lot of work on that. I have practices and I connect to my creator, and that's where I create. A lot of my morning work is connect to my creator. Before I do any content, I've always asked God to use me to speak to the audience and be of service. Like none of this is me. Like this is, dude, if people actually felt it, because I think sometimes people just haven't had the privilege of like feeling it yet. When you finally feel that oneness of alignment, it's just such a beautiful feeling that you're just like, I kind of want to be there more. And it turns out when you're there more, you create more. And I just believe God rewards those that support life. So I just wake up every day and say, how can I support more life in all ways? No judgment. And it just continues to be a really great, relationship.
I may have asked you this last time, but I'll ask you it again now because your boys are here. What do you love about each of your boys? What's your favorite things?
The one on the right, Max, what I love most about him is how determined he is. He's just so determined. Hey, buddy, when you get into stuff, you just want to get it done. He just figures it out. It's so beautiful. Like no matter what it is, it could be, he does stuff that most adults just give up on. And he's just like, he just figures it out. I caught him staying up. I know you were staying up late. Okay. And I didn't get mad at him because guess what? I would have done the same thing. Like you can't get mad at your kid for being passionate. He literally put him to bed. And then an hour later, he'd be like, nobody's awake. And he'd go downstairs, grab his iPad, and he'd keep editing his videos. So he's got to sleep though. So we talked about it. And then what I love about Noah is his heart. He doesn't even know this. My wife told me this school, his teacher told my wife that one of the kids in his class was going to change schools because the kids were picking on him, but because he's on the spectrum, and because Noah plays with him, he's going to stay in the school. Yeah, clap that up. Yeah, this little kid named William. He's just the most beautiful little dude, and yeah, you hope you raise your kids to do stuff like that, but yeah, it's cool when you find out that they do.
Dude, I love it. All right, final 2 questions. First of all, what are you excited about? What's coming up?
Just the collaborations. I mean, I grew up in a small town in Eastern Canada, not thinking I would even do anything with my life. Next month, I'm keynoting John Maxwell's event and Tony Robbins.
Wild.
It's wild, like crazy. So I'm just trying. I keep working on my craft, storytelling, content creation. We built a big media company up in Canada. Sam leads the whole thing. So if you see any of my social media stuff, my YouTube, my Instagram, TikTok, that's him and his team. He's led and built this incredible team, trying to be top in the world. That's our vision. I'm giving myself the rest of my life. So I got hopefully a long time to do it. And it's a cool phase of life where reach and reputation, I think, is the leading domino. And to the degree that I keep investing in that and I have spare cycles to do and build and incubate other companies or buy companies, I do that. But that's kind of my current phase, working on my next book. Well, actually, so I have a software growth book coming out in October. That's done. Just finished manuscript last week, called Software as a Science. And then I've been working on my next book following Buy Back Your Time outline. We're going to start writing that in January. So yeah, I'm in that creative phase of my life and I'm having a lot of fun doing it.
That's fun, man. And where do people go if they want to learn more about you, give you money?
Instagram. I'm a big fan. If you guys want to work with me, just message me Elite, ELITE on Instagram. I've got last time I think I gave your audience just for you the executive assistant playbook. If I didn't, I meant to, but if you guys are interested in the house manager one, because I think I might have shared that one. Did I share that with you?
I don't think you did, but I would love that.
Just message me on Instagram, private message, house manager playbook, and I'll send that over to you. Just direct link, Google Doc. It's just Dan Martell on Instagram. But yeah, Betty, who's managed my life and all my real estate and literally every aspect of my personal stuff, we sanitize it and put that together for some clients. So I'd send it to everybody.
Dude, appreciate you.
100%.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, man.